Hello and welcome back to your 3ds Max tutorials. So in our previous tutorial I showed you how to draw a curtain, and I'm going to show you a second way to draw a curtain using the cloth modifier. So I'm just going to reduce my ribbon for a second, and I'm going to draw in a plane in my front viewport, and I'm going to give it 40 segments by 40 so we have some geometry to work with. I am going to right click and convert them to an editable poly, and I'm also going to draw in a box this time, and I'm just going to draw about halfway along the top of the plane so that the top section is enclosed within it. You will see why now in a second. And if I go over here to my left viewport, I'm just going to pull it back. So if I just zoom in on that entire viewport, you can see that the top of the plane is actually enclosed within the box. Okay, so let's add a cloth modifier to the plane. And let's go to Object Properties, select the plane, and we'll use a cotton again. Works well for curtains. And OK. So if I drop down my cloth, and you can see here we have a group. So I'm going to select the top vertices of the plane that are enclosed within the rectangular shape. I'm going to make a group. Just going to call these top. And you can see again the top here is unassigned. So we're going to add a node, and we're going to use this rectangular shape as the node to hold those points in position. Let's go back into the cloth modifier. Let's make sure that self-collision is set to at least 2 and centimeters per unit. In this case we'll go with 3. It works pretty well for me and the settings that I have on 3ds Max. And let's just simulate that locally. And as you can see, it's starting to drape nicely, but it's held in position from the node. So while it's still simulating in local. So if I select the rectangle, press R and reduce this in the along the x-axis, so you can see that the plane is now starting to crinkle and crease as if it actually were a fabric. So it's taken the geometry that we gave it with the 40 by 40 segments, and it's using that geometry to create the folds. And let me press G. And because we have the self-collision set to 2, we shouldn't have any overlapping planes or overlapping faces. So let me just zoom that around. That looks pretty good. Okay, if I select that and I can stop the simulation, that looks pretty good. So what I might actually do is I'm going to stretch it back out again to where it was. So if I go back into the plane and bring it back out. So only when I have simulate local selected is where I can actually manipulate this. If I didn't have the simulation activated, when I resize this rectangular shape, well then it's only the rectangle that will move and the plane will stay in its position. So I'm just going to leave that as it is. I'm going to make a copy of this rectangular shape about halfway, maybe a little bit more than halfway down. We'll leave it as a copy. I'm just going to name this box middle box. It's a good habit to get into, naming your objects, but for the sake of these tutorials, so I can run through quickly, I'm not naming everything. So I'm just going to go back into the cloth modifier, back into group, and I'm going to select the points that are within that rectangle. I'm going to make another group. I'm going to call this mid. And again, it's unassigned, so we're going to use this middle rectangle as our node. So node to middle box. So now we can just distinguish between the two. And back into our cloth modifier. Simulate local. Now, if we reduce the scale of our top rectangle along our x-axis, you'll notice that the middle node is holding it in place. And if we go ahead and rescale that one in, just give it a second, it'll take some time to do its work. It's taking all of the physics into account. I'm just bringing it in a little bit smaller, as if it's being held by a curtain tie. And what we can actually do is, while we're at it, we can take that and we can rotate it a little bit and scale it a little bit more, just to give it a nice effect. And then maybe take this top one and maybe move it over a little bit, like so. That looks pretty good. Maybe another little bit, just to give it some more definition. Okay, that looks pretty nice. And we can stop the simulation. That looks pretty good. It's a little bit jaggedy, so I might just undo that simulation. I might just redo it one more time, because that's not quite what I was after. I probably stopped it a little bit too soon. So let's simulate local. Let's take our top section. Let's scale it in, like so. Let's take our middle node and scale him in a little bit smaller. Just going to make sure that my collision is set. Yes, self collision is set to 2. Let me just undo that one. I'm going to select this rectangle and bring him in ever so slightly. And then might move this top one over. And rotate this guy a little bit. So we let that fall and drape until it's ready. And what we might actually do is just move this guy up a little bit more, so we can get that nice hang, that nice natural flow of the fabric, that nice natural draping. Maybe not so much, a little bit less. I'm going to zoom in on this viewport so you can see what's happening. I think I might have moved it up a bit too high. Okay, so we can get the idea there. And what I might do is, I might turn off the visibility of the 2 nodes. And I'm going to turn off that simulation. I'm going to make a mirrored copy then of this curtain. And you can see in the clone selection, let's make it an instance. That's okay. And let's drag him over here like so. And if you had a little bit more time than I had, you can draw in your lace or your rope like so. And you can position it where it hangs, and you can add a lot more detail to that. And again, with the top drape, you could also add in a plane along this vertical section. So you simply just draw in a plane like so, and add in a couple of vertical nodes, and you simply just do the very same thing. So you'd add in a couple of nodes like so along the vertical orientation, and then you could move and manipulate those nodes to your desired effect. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to add a shell modifier to both of these. Again, we go with 0.5 and a turbo smooth. The old reliable, 2 iterations will be enough. So you can see we have this nice creased drapery with a nice natural fold. Okay, we'll leave it at that for this tutorial, and we'll pick it up next time. Take care.